Hello, and welcome to Plymouth Today. I'm your host, Bill York, and we're delighted to have you with us as we start a brand new series of programs on Plymouth Today. And we've got some great programs for you and a terrific one to start off today. But before we do that, let me ask you a question or two. Let's say that you're coming home from work and it's 6 o'clock at night and it's dark out. You walk through your front door and come face to face with an intruder. What do you do? Do you do anything at all? Let me give you a second scenario. You go out early in the morning for your morning run and you meet somebody who's not behaving properly and you feel a little threatened. What do you do then? Or do you do anything at all? We're going to answer a lot of those questions for you. And let me introduce you to my guest, Patrick McNaughton. Welcome, Patrick. It's nice to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Nice to meet you. Patrick is the president of Dark Knight Consulting, and they are a company that works with individuals and groups and teaches you how to prepare yourself for emergencies and exact situations like we're talking about. And this is really interesting things, and I met Patrick at a chamber meeting a few weeks ago, which was very interesting, and we got talking about different experiences, and I realized that this was really important information and good information to be sharing with you, because it's not only important for senior citizens, it's important for everybody to be prepared for an emergency. And this entails a number of things. But let me tell you a little bit about Patrick's background before we get into this. It's amazing. Patrick retired from the United States Army after 23 years with the rank of Command Sergeant Major, which, by the way, is the highest enlisted rank you can achieve in the Army. And when I first met Patrick, I said, "You don't look like any Command Sergeant Major I ever knew." They all seem to be pretty old, grizzly guys, but not Patrick, as you can plainly see. He's also had a career in law enforcement. He's a lifetime NRA member and an NRA certified instructor in firearm safety, basic pistol, personal protection in the home, and a program that I want to talk to you about called Refuse to be a Victim.
Yes, sir.
Which is very interesting too. But this is a great subject, and it's one that we hear about so often now when we hear about the Kimberly Gates situation in Mount Vernon, which was so unfortunate, and she dies, her daughter is left for dead.
Right.
And some of these things that happen. And one of the things that we had talked about was the average response time in the United States for law enforcement on a call is 8 minutes.
That's right, national.
And I found that to be rather interesting. Obviously, there are some that are much quicker than that.
Right.
But the national average is 8. That seems like a long time.
Right, well, the city of Atlanta is 32.
32?
The city of Atlanta.
Yep. My goodness. Then that's not the place to be if you have a problem.
Well, it all depends. It could depend on your jurisdiction. Like Moulton Borough, where I live, we have at times only 2 officers on, but Moulton Borough has a huge footprint. So if someone's at the far end of the city, it could take them, well, as a matter of fact, my next door neighbor called the other day because there was a bear in her chicken coop.
Oh, really?
And it took the officers 35 minutes to get there. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they would have responded differently had it been not a bear.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, that's one of the interesting scenarios about living here, I guess. You know, those are the kind of things that you run into and the kind of things that happen. But let's talk a little bit about home invasions, which you hear more and more about now. And it seems like every week that goes by, there'll be 2 or 3 stories at least of a home invasion and how dangerous that can be. And one of the things that you were talking about is in the United States now, there's a home invasion on the average of every 20 seconds.
Right.
That's very prevalent and obviously is a increasing problem that we have to deal with.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Laconia over the summer had, I believe, 18 or 20 through the summer.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they caught the person. People would just wake up and there's someone standing over them in their bedroom. That's pretty scary.
That is very scary. Yeah. That's absolutely for sure. Well, let's talk about New Hampshire as we're talking about Moulton Borough, for example, or some of the other communities. Do you, as an expert in the field, do you feel like we're safe do you feel like people are adequately prepared to deal with those kind of situations?
Well, that's sort of a tricky question. I moved here from Georgia, the metro Atlanta area, 4 years ago, and New Hampshire is a very safe state. We have a much less denser population than, say, the county that I moved from. I think the county that I moved from had the same population as the entire state of New Hampshire. So the dispersal rate is much less here. And people have a sense of freedom here, obviously, live free or die, and,
Sure.
and that's awesome and that's great. But crime is moving out, and I believe that's dependent on the economy and the way the life is moving right now, and people are getting desperate, and people want things, or they need things, or they need to provide their family with things, and people are starting to do crazy things now.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true, and I think a lot of the issues are drug related, it seems, which obviously is another problem that we have to deal with, and I'm sure law enforcement is considering that. But I think where you and I want to take this is to more of the personal level.
Right.
You know, how we can be prepared to deal with these sort of things, and what we need to learn through someone like you in order to be protected from these kind of situations. You're sharing a story with me the other night about a lady, and you were working with her in her house, and you were saying, well, you know, okay, I'm an intruder, what are you going to do?
Right.
And the lady said, well, I'm going to get my baseball bat.
Right.
Finish what happened with that.
Well, I was doing a home evaluation, and we were talking of the different uses of force, so to speak. And the lady was very adamant about, well, if somebody's in my house, I'm just going to whack them with my baseball bat. And I said, okay, great. Where's your baseball bat? And it was beside her bedroom, beside her bed. And I said, okay, let's come out here in the hallway. And we were standing there, and I said, okay, I'm 3 or 4 feet away from you, and I'm an intruder. Swing away. And quite rapidly, she realized she can't swing the baseball bat in the hallway. And her eyes got wide, and she realized, I'm in trouble, which you would be. And that's part of the problems, that people just do not realize, they're going to use a 9-iron, they're going to use mace, or they're going to use a taser. All of those have one huge fallibility of it brings you very close to the intruder.
Right.
And that's the danger part.
Right.
And if you're going to use a taser and the person has a heavy coat on, and you haven't checked your smoke detector in 6 months, you probably haven't checked the battery in your taser for 6 months, and you go to zap some guy, well, now you just made him really mad.
Right, right, right. That brings up an interesting thing. And I was in law enforcement too when I was first out of school, and going through the state police academy when we were going through the baton training, and they were talking about that exact same thing.
Right.
They said, you got to learn how to use this thing and learn it effectively, because if you hit somebody with it, all you're going to do is make him really angry.
Right.
And that's going to make your situation 3 times worse than it was when you originally walked into it. So sure. Now that's an interesting thing to think about, and I want to talk about the training that you do as we get into this, because that's an important part of it. And as we're going along through the program, you will see the email address and the telephone number to contact Patrick, and we want you to do that, as you have any questions, and pay heed to this program, because this is very important information, and it's information that you should all have. Let's talk about some of the cases recently that have taken place in New Hampshire. The Kimberly Cates case in Mount Vernon is a tragic one, where the mother has killed the daughter, 11 years old, I think, was left for dead.
Right.
And husband, I guess, was away on a business trip.
Absolutely.
I mean, what a tragic situation, and we don't know what took place there, but I guess you were saying that apparently they had followed her or was stalking her prior to that?
From what I understand, they had picked them up, basically leaving a grocery store, and then followed them to their residence, and then waited for an opportune time to break in. And we don't know how they broke in, how much force they used to break in, but apparently she was murdered in her bed, bludgeoned to death, hacked to death, whatever, 32 hacks or something. And that's just tragic that in your own bed, they got that far into the house, inside the perimeter of the house. Yeah. And she had no safety zone. She had no secure perimeter. And that's part of what I teach is to build layers of protection around you in your home so that you can keep out the bad guys.
Yeah, yeah. Important information, and we're certainly going to get into that. Tell me about Dark Knight Consulting. How did you get involved in this thing, and how did you pick out the name?
Well, Dark Knight, first of all, comes from, you know, a dark, stormy night. You know, you're out looking through the windows and the lightning, and it's usually very scary and intimidating. And the name is not meant to be intimidating, but it's just as a reminder that in the middle of the night, on a dark night, is when a lot of bad things sometimes happen. Not that it can't happen in the middle of the day, but I didn't name the company Bright Shiny Sunshiny Night.
That's true.
So it refers to that. As far as where I came up with the idea, I like to teach people how to be self-sufficient. And for years in the military and in law enforcement, you know, I would see that when law enforcement shows up at the crime scene, that's what they're doing. They're showing up at the crime scene. They're not there before the crime scene. They're showing up afterwards. And I always thought it was just a shame that, you know, wow, why couldn't I have been sitting in the cul-de-sac writing my report when this person needed me? This person should have been more prepared, or you know, had some defenses. And it's just something I played around with and toyed with. And we moved here to New Hampshire, and I found myself in another line of work, and then I found myself not in another line of work. And I said, well, it's time to kick this and put it into fruition. And 2 years ago, we started Dark Knight Consulting. And, you know, little baby steps, like the military says, crawl, walk, run.
That's right.
I believe we're in the walk phase, and, you know, it's going. It's getting there.
Good. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the things that you do. One of the things that fascinated me was Refuse to be a Victim seminars.
Right.
And those are seminars that are available for college students, for church groups, professional office staff. I mean, again, this is information that is really important to have.
Right.
Because you never know what kind of an emergency you're going to be confronted with.
Right.
So in order to have some kind of some idea of how to deal with these kind of things is critical information. So tell me about the seminars. How do those work, and what are the kind of things that you cover?
Well, let me back up just a second. With my personal business, the way it goes is I try my best to do one-on-one personal evaluations and consultations. So that comes into your home to teach you in your home how to be safe within your own home, because you understand the nuances of your kitchen and your dining room and your hallways and so forth. The Refuse to be a Victim seminars is for groups that don't have time to have, you know, me come to their home, and they basically get a compressed version of what I teach or what I bring to a home evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
It goes through many of the same steps as an evaluation. It's just condensed, and you're in a class with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So those classes are good. They usually, you know, they're fairly economic. It's a good reception when you're in the seminar with the people. But the thing that I find with teaching large classes is eventually you have 10 or 15 people in a class. 5 of them are not paying any attention.
Right.
Or it goes from 8 to 12, and at 12 you break for lunch, and they leave most of their paperwork on the table, and they leave for lunch, and they don't remember anything you told them.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's, I'd much rather teach one-on-one.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the one-on-one.
Right.
If somebody says to you, geez, I need to learn, you know, how to protect myself and how to be prepared for some of these things. Take us through what you would do as you arrive to work with somebody individually on one of your projects.
Okay, well, usually it starts after a consultation on the phone or email or whatever. And once I arrive at the person's home, usually it starts about a mile away from their home. And I'll drive around the neighborhood, I'll drive around the area that they're in, and determine, well, okay, this is a security issue or this is not a security issue. You got plenty of street lights, et cetera, et cetera. Get to their mailbox, and you start right from the mailbox. And you go the whole yard to the front door, around the house, and then you in the house, and then you evaluate the person themselves. What do you do now?
Mm-hmm.
And those evaluations can go from 3 to 5 hours. So they're very extensive. and there's a lot of information that has to be covered. Most people don't realize their weaknesses within their own homes because they're there every day. They just see their house, they see their front door, they see their back door, and they don't realize the weaknesses that they're putting themselves into.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about some of the weaknesses that you find.
Doors are a big factor. Improper locks. Windows that are at ground level that would allow easy access. Lighting on the house. Here's a big one that I find, it's somewhat humorous, is people put their last names on their mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
And many people don't usually think about that. So, let's say your name is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Well, then one day, Mrs. Smith is, at home and she's doing her thing, and she gets a knock on the door, and she goes to the door, and someone says, "Hi, Mrs. Smith. My car broke down right up the street. Can I use your phone?" Well, automatically, Mrs. Smith thinks that this person knows them and builds a trust.
Sure.
And that's where things go south, and you get in trouble. So
Mm-hmm.
I advise people to take their names off their mailboxes.
Interesting. Now that's something that you would normally think about. That is definitely an interesting thing. We were talking earlier about some of the towns that we live in, for example, where I live. A very small community, we don't even think about locking our doors.
Right.
It's just an amazing thing. And then you see something happen closely, like the Mount Vernon thing. And all of a sudden you start thinking about, well, maybe we ought to secure our doors and, start paying attention to these kind of things.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Just recently in Center Harbor, we had a home invasion in Center Harbor. I believe a 63-year-old lady came home, found her door kicked in. Physical damage to her door. She went in the house, and she encounters a 29-year-old male leaving her bedroom with a backpack full of stuff.
Yeah.
And she grabs him and sets him in a chair and says, "You wait right there while I call the police." Well, it was very interesting because I tracked some of this through my Facebook, my Dark Knight Facebook, and it was a blog from, I think, WMUR, and it was amazing how many people were saying, "Go grandma, you go girl," and so forth and so forth, and I was like, no! This is the absolute worst possible thing that you could do.
Sure.
Is to go in your home when you find damage on your home, because that could have turned out tragic, and that could have just gone really, really bad.
Yeah, yeah.
She got lucky.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think that confuse a lot of people, because you don't know what you should do. For example, if you're a store clerk and somebody comes in and says,
Right.
"Give me all your money,"
Right.
well, the consultation that we would normally give people is you don't do anything.
Right.
You just give them what they want and let them go.
Right.
Because that way you're not going to get hurt, hopefully, and it's going to prevent the situation from escalating. And I guess what you're saying is you do the same thing in the home.
Right.
Yeah, if you're confronted with something like that, back away and let them do whatever it is they're going to do, and hopefully you won't get hurt. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And she was worried about her dog, and rightly so. And we all love our pets, but they are pets.
Yeah.
And I hope I don't make any enemies here, but if you're in your home and you do have an invasion, and you have a pet, lock yourself in your bedroom and put the dog on the outside. Let the dog deal with the bad guy, and it will give you more time.
Sure.
And that's what the dog's for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was an interesting thing you can share. You were telling me about, you went into a home, and the lady had a German Shepherd there.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Right. Well, we had talked previously, and she was all, praise on the dog. This dog is great. This is my protector. And I drive a fairly big truck, diesel engine, and I showed up at the house, and I go up and knock on the door, and she opens the door, and there's the dog. And the dog never alerted, the dog never barked, the dog never, and I'm just a complete stranger. And she was flabbergasted. She was like, "What happened to my dog?" And I says, "Dogs are great, but never trust them.
Yeah.
Never trust them 100%.
Yeah.
Because you don't really know what they're going to do."
Yeah, true. That's true. Well, we hope you're enjoying this. My guest is Patrick McNaughton from Dark Knight Consulting, which is a firm that is going to evaluate your home and office and gives you tactical training to make you better prepared and to make you aware of your options in the event of emergency. And this really is great stuff. I should also say, Patrick is black belt in martial arts, amongst other things. But let's talk about the firearms training, which is an important thing. I think, as I know I've done that with my own wife, is to take her out and try to familiarize with a pistol and that sort of thing. And obviously, you are certified in every aspect of firearms training.
Yes, sir.
How do people get involved in that, and what do you find that most people want to learn with regards to a firearm?
Well, usually after the home evaluation, you go through the use of force continuum, which is what tools are available to you to use in case you have to use a defensive weapon, let's say. And you know, it goes all the way from using your fists to a kitchen knife to a samurai sword to the 9-iron to the taser to the pepper spray, and it eventually, and I don't necessarily advocate it because some people are not wholly familiar or comfortable with firearms, but it usually always ends up on the firearm because the firearm will give you the biggest threat level against the intruder and will give you the biggest standoff from the intruder. Hopefully you would never have to ever pull a trigger. Let's say you were locked in your bedroom and there was someone trying to get in. Just the word saying, I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it, could be enough to deter the whole situation and the person leave.
Sure.
And that's part of the training we do, is we go through those scenarios while while I'm in your home teaching you where to be in your home to defend yourself, things to say and things to think and things to do. Most people focus on handguns for home defense or personal defense. Some shotguns, not so many rifles because they're big and they're bulky and they're not easy to store in case you have children running around. And so it usually goes back to the handgun. And we teach all that, how to properly store it and how to keep it safe so it's not in the hands of unauthorized persons.
So that's actually very interesting because, again, going back to what you were saying before about keeping your distance from the intruder,
right?
That makes a lot of sense because, as you were saying before, if you're reaching for a taser or something like that, you're also within arm's reach of your intruder,
right?
And as you're doing something like this, obviously there's going to be space,
right?
And hopefully a lot of space,
right?
If that threat works,
exactly.
So that's. Do you find that most of the people that you deal with are uncomfortable initially with a weapon?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and then the NRA Basic Pistol course is a great course because it teaches you the differences between a revolver and a semi-automatic and what kind of bullet is this and what kind of bullet is that and the safe handling of it. And there's also the firing line portion where you actually get to fire the gun. And in my courses, I start really small, like with a .22. And if they're not familiar with that, it sounds silly, but I start with an airsoft.
Really?
And I have full-size, almost real-looking firearms that are airsoft. So there's no bang, but it sends a projectile and it gets the basics of sight picture and so forth and how to handle the firearm. And then you move up from there.
Interesting. Boy, that's interesting. Talk a little bit about situation awareness, which was what I was alluding to before. If you're out taking a run, or you're out walking, or you're out anywhere, obviously what you're saying there is to be aware of your surroundings,
right?
And be aware of escape routes and those kind of things.
Right.
Talk about that because that's something that we should just be thinking about anyway. And obviously we don't.
Right.
Because when you're out for a walk, the last thing you're thinking about is what am I going to do if somebody approaches me and I feel threatened? Where am I going to go? Or what am I going to do? Or what am I going to say?
Right.
Those kind of situations. And that, to me, seems very important, right? To think about those things before you go out for your walk. And, spend some time. And your kind of training would be very valuable there. Talk about that a little bit for situation awareness. That's kind of a military term too.
Sure, well, of course.
But it's important.
Basically, it's paying attention to your surroundings. It's vitally important because most people they get into their comfort zone. They get into their daily routine. They get into going to the gym and they park in the third parking space over, and they walk into the gym and they never even look to see who's there. They go right to, you know, things like that. They get into their daily routine. And we all do it. We're all very guilty of it. And it's, you have to change your mindset to just think about what's going on around you. And I try to teach people, I don't want you to become paranoid. That's the last thing I want you to do. But if you become situationally aware, you'll actually see more of life than you thought was there to start with. And you'll get more rewards out of life just by seeing more things.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things, like I try to teach ladies when they go shopping. Where do you park when you go park at the shopping mall? And they go, well, I always try to park closest to the store. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I teach them, try to find a parking space. And it might make you walk a little bit extra, but it won't hurt you. Find a parking space that has 2 empty slots, one on each side. So when you park there, there was nothing around you when you left your car. So you go in, you shop, you do your thing, and you come back, and there's a Corvette on one side and a big, ugly van on the other side. Well, your senses should be going off at that point. You should be on high alert. Not that there's anything wrong, but something is now different. And you know it's different because those 2 vehicles were not there when you left.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you just pull in any place, you don't know what was there. You're not going to really pay attention to, okay, there's a truck and there's a Volkswagen. And you go in, you shop, come back, and there's now, there's something different. You just don't pay attention to
Sure.
that. But with the 2 empty slots, you would pay attention to that. And that just carries through to everything. You know, when this lady walked into her home in Center Harbor, the first thing I didn't leave my door kicked in when I left.
Yeah.
You know, the bells and whistles should have gone off, and she should have gone into her situational awareness mode where something's not right with this picture. Because usually, if it doesn't smell right and it doesn't look right, it's not right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting. Do you spend a lot of time working with elderly, and do you have special things that you do with elderly folks?
I do.
Versus, talk about that.
Well, I find that getting into the routine of your daily routine is what gets a lot of people in trouble. They want to go to the library, they want to go to the church, they want to go, and they just want to go to where they want to go, and they don't think about what's going on around them.
Mm-hmm.
And we just try to get them to open their eyes more and not being paranoid, but just see what's around. And like I said, if it doesn't look right, it's probably not right.
You know, that's an interesting comment, because you would think that somebody who's looking to get into your home, for example, if they know that you leave the house every day at 10 o'clock to go to the library,
Right.
or to go wherever it is you go, then they're going to know at that point and for that time frame that that house is going to be empty.
Right.
And so optimum time to go in and do whatever it is you're going to do.
Right.
So sure, that makes a lot of sense.
Or getting into the routine of, you know, you leave all your windows and doors open because you live in New Hampshire.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have a dog. So I understand that, and I'm okay with that. But just be aware that when someone knocks on your door, the best thing you can do when a stranger knocks on your door is never open the door for them if you don't know who they are. Tell them whatever, you know, if they're trying to sell something, thank you, I'm not interested. If they're broke down, which is one of those common tactics, I stuck my car in a snowbank and my kid's in the car, I need to call a wrecker to get them out. Can I use your phone, please? Well, 2 things. You say, stay right there and I'll call the police for you. That's going to do one of 2 things. The person's going to either thank you immensely or they're going to run.
Yep, they're going to go, sure.
There's no 2 ways. They're going to thank you or they're going to run. The very second you open that door, you are in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know who this person is.
Yeah, 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 very true. Let's move on to a different aspect of this a little bit. Natural disasters and dealing with businesses, for example,
Right.
and private homes. I know you deal with that as well. And just what we've seen in the last couple of weeks
Right.
here in New Hampshire, which is totally unbelievable.
Right.
But as you look at the news this morning, when they were showing what's happened in Pennsylvania, and the huge floods and houses just being washed away.
Right.
And I guess now, unfortunately, after the fact is when we spend a lot more time thinking about it. But somebody like you can come in and say, look, you know, these are the things we should be thinking about before the fact. Now that we've seen what can happen with these sorts of things, you know, this is what you should be thinking about doing before the fact.
One of those things with, especially with businesses, and I'll talk about homes in a second, is what we call a business continuity plan, which is preparing you. What if you had a flood? The Irving station right down the street, I'm pretty sure they had a pretty good business continuity plan because they're rebuilding that store. I mean, it's like the day after, they have crews in there, this and this. But what happens to those employees?
Yeah.
You know, if you're a small business and you have 3 employees, and it's a mom and pop's business, right? What happens if your stock is not insured and you just had 3 feet of water in your showroom?
Mm.
You know, how do you deal with that? How do you get back on track? How do you get back into business where you can make money? The ice storm we had a few years ago, I believe there was like 30% of the businesses that were affected by that went out of business because they did not have a business continuity plan.
Sure.
And that includes updating your insurance, just checking your insurance, making sure records are kept, backups for things, and it just goes from there of just have a plan.
Mm.
Let's work a plan.
Yep.
And each and every business is different. I mean, I could probably rattle off 1,000 things for someone to do, and they could be at home writing it all down, but it might not apply to them. It has to be specific to your business.
Sure.
And that's what
And obviously, I guess the same thing would apply to somebody in their home.
Oh, absolutely.
To be, and the big thing to me would be evacuation.
Right.
You know, and if you have small children or, well, even teenagers, I mean, if this happens, this is where you go. I mean, with my kids when we were small, in the event of a fire, for example,
Right.
everybody leaves the house and we meet under that tree right there.
Right.
You go there and you don't move.
That's a plan.
Yep, yeah, and those kind of things. So
And you got to practice those plans.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so people knew if something happens, and the kids knew, this is what we do, and this is where we go, and this is where we stay.
Right.
So that everybody knows where everybody is, and we know that everybody got out or everybody didn't.
Well, one of the reasons that I've moved to beautiful New Hampshire is I lost my home to a house fire. We had a lightning strike and it caught the house on fire. Fire department took 12 minutes to get there. So the house was pretty involved.
Pretty much gone, yeah.
Wow. But we had a lot of our plans in place that protected us greatly, but we still lost a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like what type of packing boxes do you put things in? Of course, if you have a catastrophic fire, it's not going to make any difference. But realize that the fire department's going to come in and going to hose everything.
Yes, that's
And
right.
in Georgia, you know, in July, we had 105-degree weather, and then the mold set in, and it was just horrendous.
Yeah.
So when the insurance company came in, they want to start doing an inventory because they want to take care of you, that you're their client. We had pictures. We had, you know, a safe that had things in it that were safe. A disc, you know, a floppy disk or whatever, that had our inventory, all our important documents, our wills and so forth were all kept, and all that was safe in the safe. So what happens when you don't have that? And then it really throws you into a tailspin.
Sure.
And it's hard to recover from that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting information, and very important with the businesses too.
Right.
You know, that you were talking about before. Because you can. I mean, if you're not prepared, that can take your business right away.
Right. Well, I had a client who was sort of a client.
Yeah.
You know, we were in the negotiation phase, and they're in another state, and over this weekend, they're into audio and technical stuff, so they had a lot of computers and audio equipment and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
They were broken into this weekend, and all their computers are gone.
Wow.
All their camera equipment, everything is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And we had talked about this. You know, they were going to be a client. We had talked about this. How does he now protect the information that he had on all those computers that technically go to his customers? So now what?
Yeah.
And does he have a backup plan? Where did he store all his other information? he might have to start from ground zero again.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We, one of the things that we deal with here, and one of the things you talk about, is prolonged power loss. And where I live, that's one of the big issues, you know.
Right.
You get a puff of wind and the power goes.
Right.
That's it. So, again, that's something here that we have to deal with in New England, probably more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Is, you know, when we have a bad thunderstorm or something else, and you have a prolonged power outage, and so you deal with folks there too.
Right. We talk about what type of generators, how to sustain, what type of year. You know, if it's in the summertime, it's a little bit more forgiving. In the wintertime, and really bad in the wintertime, it might not be so forgiving.
Sure.
If you have a generator, how does it run your house? Do you have to connect it? Is it on an auto disconnect? And there's a ton of things that you have to look into. If it's a gas generator, how much gas do you have? Can you get gas?
Yes, sure,
Right.
sure.
You know, if
sure.
you're going through 5 gallons of gas a day, and you've only got 5 gallons in the spare can, well, you're only good for 2 days.
Yep, that's right.
And if you can't get it from the gas station, now what?
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
now all the food in your freezer goes bad, you're cold, you're whatever. So there's things to think about there.
Sure, sure. And again, I think this all comes around to what we were talking about before with the situation awareness,
Right.
situational awareness. You know, being aware of what might happen and whatever that may be, and spending some time and thinking about it and getting yourself prepared for it.
Right.
And that's super information. And
This last hurricane we hit, Irene, I found it interesting that the news channel was saying, okay, you got to go out prepared, you got to do this. And this was like the day before the hurricane hit. And I was like, you're late.
yeah, that's right.
You don't have time now to do this. And this
Yeah.
it's not just about, okay, I got to go to the store and get the ubiquitous milk and bread. It's, you should have already prepared, and it's also mental.
Sure.
Luckily in Moltenboro, we were lucky. We had no damage, but I spent an entire afternoon either tying things down or moving things off the deck, like chairs or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I
I stored water. I didn't know if we were going to have a power outage, but I prepared, and it took time. It's not something you can do in a half an hour.
No, that's true. Sure, sure. Oh, that's interesting. There are a number of things. One of the things that you talk about in your seminars is the psychology of the criminal mind,
Right.
which is an interesting thing. So, you know, I guess you spend a lot of time thinking about what the bad guy's thinking about, which I suppose is helpful as you're trying to work with people to
Right.
learn how to deal with these things. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, what is the mindset of a criminal? I mean, you just don't go across to your neighbor and break into his house because you want to have fun. There's a reason they're breaking into your house. They either want something, they're either there to get something from your house, or they're there to take something from you. A good example was the Pettit family in Connecticut a few years back. You know, that ended tragically. They held the kids hostage and forced the wife to go withdraw money, and
Right.
then they end up dead. And so the mindset of the criminals is, we don't always know what is driving them. It could be power, it could be a social disruption in their life that they just don't get along and they need to force, you know, themselves on people. Rape is not about sex, it's about power.
Mm.
And that's the unfortunate part. And normal everyday people don't usually understand that. And that's where the mentality of, oh, it'll never happen to me because I live in New Hampshire.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting. Tell me about the onion theory.
Okay, the onion theory. Well, an onion has layers. And that's what we try to teach you in your home, is to put layers and layers of protection around you. And no home is foolproof by any means. I mean, we can look at that because obviously we've had presidents that have been assassinated. So someone got through their layers of protection and got through to a president. So no one can ever be 100% safe. But if you put the layers around you, you make yourself much more difficult than your neighbor. And I'd rather your neighbor be hit than you be hit. So, you know, you put those layers out, and it starts from your driveway. You know, take your name off.
Yeah. That's an interesting suggestion.
Yeah.
You know, I never would have thought of that in a million years.
Right.
So, yeah.
So that's where the layers come from.
Yeah.
Some people think that my company is an alarm company system and it has really nothing to do with alarms. I highly advocate an alarm system. If you own one, use it. I know people who've had an alarm system in their home for years and they've never activated it.
Really?
And I'm like, why? Why not? It's there. Why not use it?
Sure.
And I just recently did an evaluation for an elderly couple. They had an alarm system. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know that they could secure themselves within the house and activate the alarm system. And they had a perimeter.
Yeah.
They didn't know they could do that.
Hmm.
So they let down some of those layers of protection.
Sure. That's interesting. You know, I would bet you that that's fairly common with the elderly.
Right.
That you may not, you have this system, but if you're not familiar with how to use it,
Right.
and you don't, then you're absolutely right.
And one of the other things I've seen is people will accidentally trip their alarm, and then it becomes a nuisance because some police departments charge. You know, if you trip your alarm the fourth time, now you get a bill.
Yeah.
And guess what? Now they're not going to activate the alarm. They're just going to, this is too much hassle. Well, you just lay down one of those layers of protection.
Sure, sure. And I would think the stickers that people have, you know, this property protected by whatever the alarm system is.
Right.
You know, and you see it on the front window, on the front door.
Right.
I would think that that would be something that would...
It's another layer.
Yep.
Don't trust it, but it's another layer.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, when the bad guy shows up at your house, he's either there, he's random, or he knows what he's after. So he either knows you're there and wants what you have, and specifically you, or it's random. And he goes, okay, this house looks easy, that house looks hard. Easy house.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what they go for.
Sure, sure. Boy, this is great information, and I hope you are paying attention to this and learning something from it, because it's critical that you learn to protect yourself and to add the layers as you've talked about. Very, very good information. Tell me this, how can people get in touch with you directly?
Either my website, do you want me to say that?
Yeah, well, actually what we're going to do is, we've had it on the screen, but go ahead.
Okay, it's
Whip around.
www.darknightconsultingNE for New England.com.
Okay.
My phone number, 603-707-6100, or email me at darknightconsulting@gmail.com.
Great. And so normally what happens there is, when somebody gets in touch with you, the first thing you would normally do is to come out and do the evaluation of the property, or depending, I suppose, what they want.
Right. Usually the firearms training comes after, so you have the first initial consultation, evaluation, and then the person realizes, my mace isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And they realize, okay, I need to learn firearms training. Where do I go from there? So then the firearms training comes in.
Yeah. Now, mace and that sort of thing, is that something that you advocate using?
No.
I didn't think so. Tell us why.
Well, in law enforcement, we had mace, and I never used it because I just didn't like it. It never failed that I would come on duty and go get in my patrol car, and the second I opened the door, the officer before me had maced somebody, and they'd put him in the car.
Oh, yeah.
And the car was like, I need a new car.
Yeah.
Like, well, think of this, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and you have your can of mace, and you meet a stranger in your hallway, and you mace the person in your hallway. Well, who else gets maced in that situation? Now you're maced, because it goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And now you're both crying, and he's mad.
Yeah.
And you can't see anything. So I say it's just, use it on the bears.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Lots of things to think about. And I thank you so much
Thank you
for being with me. Is there anything else we need to cover? Anything we missed?
I don't know.
I think we got it. I think we got it. But thank you so much. And please, you know, get in contact with Patrick. He's going to be a great help to you. If you have any questions at all, he can answer them for you. Just remember the onion theory, the layers of protection. That's important for you. So, but definitely get in touch with Patrick. I'm sure he can help you. Patrick McNaughton, Dark Knight Consulting, and you have seen the information here as we go along. And I hope you have enjoyed this. It's always good to bring you this type of program with this type of information. And we have some great programs upcoming. Watch the schedules here on the TV station so that you can see when we will be on, and we're going to have some great guests for you. So I thank you for watching. So until I see you again for Plymouth Today, I'm Bill York.
I wouldn't trade a thing for this country world. You can have your city and all its strife. Me and my honey, we got a good life.